The total number of law enforcement actions last month was just over 52,000, down almost 65% from the peak in May of 144,000. This represents the fourth month in a row of a steady decline in apprehensions. This is an unprecedented achievement. Last month, it was another decline of 18% from August to September, and this marked the fourth consecutive month that the United States Border Patrol alone averaged 25% lower in the last 4 months. And why have we achieved these significant results? Make no mistake as well, President Trump has worked to have other countries in the regions like Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to join us as true partners, to come together to address this as a regional crisis that it is. And that's exactly what is happening. Initiatives implemented under this administration, like the Migrant Protection Protocol, or MPP, which was established in accordance with Section 235 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, have brought about the downward trend in border enforcement statistics and strengthened the integrity of the immigration system. In close partnership with the government of Mexico, MPP allows for migrants illegally crossing or at the POEs without documents to be returned to Mexico to await expedited immigration proceedings in the United States. If they have meritorious claims, they receive relief in just a few months rather than waiting in limbo in the United States, sometimes for years. And if they have unsuccessful claims, they are swiftly returned to their home country, or they can return voluntarily. Through our partnership with Mexico, CBP has enrolled more than 51,000 people in MPP. And Mexico, again, being true partners, has agreed to provide humanitarian protections and even work authorizations to these individuals for the duration of their stay. With MPP, migrants are receiving due process and protection while the United States is restoring integrity to our immigration system. We're closing the loopholes and diminishing the smuggling organization's ability to profit on the back of these migrants while simultaneously exploiting our system. Through this and other initiatives, CBP is continuing to collaborate with our foreign partners, particularly Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, to address this as a regional crisis, as I said, specifically targeting gangs, human smuggling organizations, and the movement of illicit drugs. And while the Northern Triangle countries are stepping up to address the regional crisis, expanding their asylum capabilities, and expediting the return of citizens who do not qualify for asylum in the United States, Mexico's efforts are leading the way. Mexico's continued support of MPP and enhanced border security efforts along their southern border, in the interior, and along the U.S.-Mexico border is something really for the history books. The partnership between Mexico and the United States concerning this regional crisis is having a dramatic impact. The administration, we continue to enact a network of policies and regulations and initiatives, all within the current legal framework. Unfortunately, as we discussed before, judicial activism by lower courts continuously enjoins these attempts to address the crisis. The asylum IFR, for example, that requires migrants in the United States along the southwest border to seek asylum in a third country is governed by current law, yet it was enjoined by a lower court, and it took the Supreme Court just recently to overrule that lower court. And I'm here to tell you today we are instituting that asylum IFR this week. The Flores regulation is another example, which allows DHS to enforce immigration laws passed by Congress to detain families with dignity and respect during the duration of the immigration proceedings. It's actually part of the Flores Settlement Agreement, the law. But what happened when we tried to introduce that regulation? It was also stopped. So despite these obstacles and Congress's inaction, the administration efforts, they're working. I'll give you an example. Just 4 short months ago, our daily apprehensions were close to 5,000. And today, I just looked at it on my screen before I left my office, it's below 1,700. We went from over 19,000 people in custody just 4 short months ago to less than 4,000. We have essentially ended catch and release. If you come to our borders now with a child, it's no longer an immediate passport into the interior of the United States. Instead, they will be afforded a lawful and expedited process, but they will not be released into the interior United States, never to be heard from again. While this demonstrates an incredible effort, especially by the men and women of CBP, there is more to do. 1,700 daily apprehensions, as I mentioned, is still unacceptable. The former Secretary of DHS, Jay Johnson, he's been said several times that when he was Secretary, a bad day was 1,000 apprehensions. I agree with him 100%. And let's keep in mind, although we apprehended almost a million individuals this year, fiscal year 19, we estimate, and this is a conservative estimate, that there's probably around 150,000 individuals who eluded apprehension. That's nearly 13,000 each month. The bottom line, we still need Congress to pass meaningful legislation to address our broken legal framework when it comes to immigration. And while Congress has failed to bring a single piece of meaningful legislation to the floor, this president, this administration is doing exactly what he promised the American people. Now let me move on to something else, the wall. Having served as chief of the Border Patrol in 2016, I proudly support the need and importance of the wall. CBP, with the help of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, is continuing to provide the men and women of CBP what they have asked for to do the job of protecting this great nation on the front lines. To date, a total of 71 miles of new wall has already been constructed. And it's not just a wall, it's a wall system, integrating lighting, technology, and access roads. This wall system is essential to our nation's border security by replacing outdated and dilapidated designs and construction of a much-needed physical barrier in strategic locations as requested by the leaders in the field. This isn't what the president asked for. This is what the experts asked for, to help them do their job to safeguard and protect this great nation. The president has simply listened to them, and he's delivering his promise. By the end of 2020, CBP expects to have approximately 450 miles of new border wall system constructed. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, walls work. Our agents know it, and the data shows it. Everywhere we have installed borders along the southwest border, agents gain more operational control, illegal drug and human smuggling activity declines, agent safety improves, and border communities are safer and more secure on both sides of the border. And the wall just doesn't benefit border communities. By the way of illustration, in a 5-day enforcement action that ended last Wednesday, the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement arrested 97 illegal aliens in 6 Midwest states. That's important, including those with prior criminal histories, convictions for serious crimes, assault, battery, child exploitation, sexual assault, drug possession, hit and run, and weapons offenses. And again, this was in 6 states in the Midwest. This underscores the reality that some of the illegal aliens who cross at the southwest border make their way into the nation's interior and commit serious crimes. If we're going to have a rational and intellectually and honest debate over this issue, we must acknowledge the public safety issues imposed by some, not all, but some illegal aliens. The wall serves to impede and increase our ability to apprehend criminal illegal aliens before they make it into the interior United States. That is the truth. The wall also increases our ability to stem the flow of illicit narcotics into our country. Last year, we lost 68,000 people to drug overdoses. The year before that, we lost 70,000 people due to drug overdoses. And last year, CBP seized more than 910,000 kilograms of illicit narcotics. 910,000. As an example, the majority of heroin comes from our southwest border, making its way to your town, your city, and your state. So this further illustrates what goes on at the border impacts every community, and the wall gives CBP the opportunity to more effectively detect and prevent drugs from entering our country and killing our citizens. That's why I always say every town, every city, every state is a border town, border city, and border state. Now let me close by pointing out a couple other additional accomplishments of CBP agents and officers. Every day they answer the call, putting their lives on the line to protect this nation. And this just isn't a tagline. Over 30 years of law enforcement experience, this agency is something, and they do something that I've never seen before. In fiscal year 2019, United States Border Patrol agents rescued more than 4,900 people along the southwest border. Let that soak in a minute. They rescued 4,900 individuals along the southwest border. In the midst of this crisis, our agents rendered aid and in many cases put themselves in harm's way to rescue thousands of people whose lives or well-being at risk. When the agents see a migrant family struggling in a river, they've answered the call. When they locate people dying of thirst in the desert, they answer the call. When our agents and officers see somebody in need, they don't ask them questions about their citizenship or their migration status. They see a human being in need and they answer the call. And they've done so 4,900 times this year. These incredible stories play out just about every day along our border, and they deserve our attention. These stories, and these stories that the American people deserve to know through the news media. I think now we have time for a few questions. Thank you. So, yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Morgan, thank you so much. Our colleagues in Mexico say they are talking to migrants, doctors, shelter directors, who say MPP, in essence, the U.S. government is creating violent and dangerous situations that they are trying to escape from their home countries. What is your response to that, and what are you doing to address this violence?
So Mexico is doing a very similar activities that we are doing here. So here, our system was overwhelmed. I think everybody understands that. Again, back in May, 144,000. We relied on NGOs and faith-based organizations. That's one example that the government of Mexico is doing. The same similar process that we did. So they're relying on NGOs and faith-based organizations to help them with the individuals that are going over there, including MPP. In addition to that, the UN is there actively in the northern border of Mexico, helping them address and deal with the individuals that are enrolled in MPP. The International Organization for Migration, for example, is actually there assisting through the UN and assisting the government of Mexico. They're actually providing free service for people that are enrolled in MPP to actually return to their home country if they feel unsafe or they're just getting tired to wait, because the majority of them know they're economic migrants and they're not going to qualify for asylum. And now that the message is getting out that we are, through this administration efforts, we're closing those loopholes. And so now the message is finally getting out. We're trying to overcome the message that the cartels have been putting out there that it's going to be a free ride into the United States. We're now sending the message that if you're coming here as an economic migrant, you're not going to be allowed in the United States. That's driving a lot of people to return.
In other words, the U.S.
Yes, sir.
in other words, the U.S. is not doing anything to
I
work
answer your
with
question.
Mexico.
Yes, sir.
You didn't, sir.
Yes, sir.
If I
Go ahead.
could, let me follow up actually on what she was asking you about. Is there operational and financial collaboration with the Mexicans? The president and you have also been very complimentary about what they're doing. So I'm just curious, what's the level of that involvement? And is what we're doing making a difference to try to keep those people safe as they try to make their journey to this country and or in Mexico, for example?
Absolutely. We're dealing with the government of Mexico at high levels almost on a daily basis, and a local level, which really a lot of times that's where it happens. I just returned from RGV again, where I talked to our local leadership, and they expressed to me the great collaborative working relationship they have with the government of Mexico. For example, I'll give you an example. So MPP times. We're working with the government of Mexico to make sure that their capacity to receive people is just that they have the capacity to receive them so that they're not overwhelmed. We're talking about the times and the durations of when we're actually going to return them to Mexico, whether it's hours early in the morning or at night. We're working with them on a constant basis. Again, another important thing that we're working with them too is it's bigger than just MPP. So we're working with them to address the drug smuggling routes and the drug smuggling organization. We're working with them on a daily basis to help them improve their ability to actually conduct operations within Mexico to go after the cartels and the drug smuggling organizations and the gang members. And we're doing the same thing with the Northern Triangle countries. I think everybody here knows by now, all three Northern Triangle countries have signed agreements right now. And like I said in my opening remarks, we're working with those countries on a daily basis. I have personnel that are down in the Northern Triangle countries to help them improve their capacity, not just with their law enforcement activities, but also their asylum capabilities as well.
That's a lot of money in terms of paying for Mexico's participation and providing security along the border. Are we as Americans helping to pay for that?
I think what we're doing is we're being good, true partners as they are in dealing with this as a regional crisis. We all have responsibilities a part of this. They're helping us. Think about this. They've got 25,000 troops that are now dedicated to this. They've an enormous amount of troops to their southern border, interior enforcement, and at their U.S.-Mexico border. Every law enforcement action that they take, that helps our country. Right now, they've almost doubled their southern border apprehensions. That helps this country. The fact that they've received 50,000 individuals through MPP, that's a great cost and expense to them. They're helping us, and we help them. So, yes, sir.
Thank you. While you're up here, I wanted to ask you about a number of incidents over the past year of CBP agents harassing journalists on their way into the country from overseas assignments. Can you say right now that conduct is unacceptable, and can you say what you're doing about it to stop this from happening?
So a couple of things. First of all, unequivocally, let me say that any journalist, right, that is stopped and harassed, treated improperly because they're a journalist is absolutely unacceptable, unequivocally. And so what we do, and I read a recent article about that, and when that happens, a couple of things can happen. If you feel that you have been inappropriately handled, harassed, then you need to report that immediately, right? And there's a couple different avenues. You can report it directly to CBP, our Office of Professional Responsibility, DHSIG, and I encourage you to do that. If you feel that you've been inappropriately harassed, you need to do that. We proactively, if we see something in an article, even if it hasn't been reported, we're going to report it to our Office of Professional Responsibility. Because here's one thing we can say. We can disagree all we want, right? I learned from Lieutenant General Lear a long time ago, disrespect doesn't mean disagreement, right? And there's a little thing in the country called freedom of speech. So anything that we do that would impede that, we are going to hold people accountable. It's unacceptable, 100%. So, yes, ma'am.
A couple questions. One, do you know how many kids are currently being held at the border of that 4,000 number you cited?
So I don't know that specifically, but we can get you those numbers. We keep track of that.
And just to follow up more broadly, the Northern Triangle countries, Mexico, what is the administration doing to address the root causes of the problem? The violence, the poverty. I hear you talking about troops and the reinforcements that have been sent in, but is the U.S. actually sending in resources that can help stem the flow of those core issues?
So I think that's spot on. That's a great question, because we can address the loopholes on our system, those pull factors, all we want. But until we also help those countries address the push factors, we're only going to be half there. So we are. And again, a couple examples. Right now, besides the agreements that have been signed by all three countries, and again, look, that's not just about the asylum part of that. Those agreements really go to the heart of addressing this as true partners as a regional crisis, to do just what you hit. You were spot on, to increase their capacity, right, to go after the smuggling organizations, to increase their capacity to go after the gang members, to stop that violence. So that's one thing that we're absolutely helping. Another thing we're trying to do is help build their capacity, their asylum capacity as well. So we're doing those type of things every single day with those Northern Triangle countries to help them build. Because at the end of the day, look, Border Patrol agents will tell you, they've talked to these individuals. They want to stay in their home country, right? I mean, that's their home. And look, I've talked to all three ministers of security for the Northern Triangle countries, and they've said to me, it wasn't just to me, to a group of U.S. officials, they said, you know, America, please change your laws, fix your loopholes, because you're taking our kids, for example. They said, you're taking our vitality, you're taking the youth of our country. We want our kids back. Fix your laws. Work with us, and we'll work with you to stem the flow of our children leaving our country. So we recognize that, and we are trying to help them. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Given the decline that you've mentioned in border apprehensions that you've seen over the course of the past few months, and also the cooperation that you've mentioned that you're receiving from Mexico, is a safe third country agreement with Mexico even necessary?
So I can tell you right now, what the dialogues that we're having with Mexico is, what they're doing right now is incredible. We're going to continue to have dialogues to continue to improve anywhere that we can between our partnership, and again, to really look at this as a regional crisis. But right now, we're just focusing on the incredible effort that's going on right now. They are, Mexico, absolutely, again, and I mean this, this really is, the cooperation and partnership we have with Mexico right now really is one for the history books. It really is.
Mexico's Chapter says that such an agreement is not necessary because of the numbers that you've also cited. Do you disagree with the Foreign Minister?
No, I don't. Right now, the cooperation, I mean, it's a good question. Right now, the cooperation that we are receiving with Mexico right now, it is exactly where we need it to be. I'll give you an example. Just last week was the first time OTMs other than Mexicans, this is the first time that the government of Mexico actually apprehended more OTMs than the Border Patrol did. The first time since we started keeping those stats. That, I think, illustrates the incredible work that they're doing. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. In talking about how long Mexico can sustain this, you very complimentary about what they're doing right now, but the last time you were here, you were very skeptical about how long they could keep this up. So feasibly, how long can they keep this level of productivity in helping the U.S. with the border crisis?
So I think, honestly, as a law enforcement individual for a long time, I think part of what makes us okay at our jobs is that we always maintain a healthy degree of skepticism. But I can tell you, 30 days is a long time in this crisis. What Mexico has shown me is they're sustaining this. Their capacity is growing. On all those fronts, their interior enforcement, their enforcement of the southern border, as well as their continued expansion of MPP and the support of that. Having said that, what I feel though is even though they're being incredible partners, for a durable, lasting solution, we cannot rely on other countries to fix the loopholes in our system. They're being great partners, but at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. It's Congress's responsibility. As this administration, this president is coming up with these new initiatives and regs and policies, and even though judicial activism is trying to enjoin those and put up obstacles, at the end of the day, Congress's failure to act is the issue. So to have a durable, meaningful solution with respect to this crisis, Congress has got to get off the bench, work on a bipartisan matter to pass meaningful legislation to address this crisis. I've said that, and I'm going to keep saying that. So, yes, sir.
You were very effusive in your praise of the Border Patrolman on the ground, and when I went to the border this spring, they were thankful for that, but thought it was a bit hollow because they say their pay scale and their overtime pay policy is hampering their efforts. They would like to see a change in the overtime pay policy. They would like to see greater numbers, more boots on the ground, and they hold you responsible for that. Could you address that issue? And then if the numbers are down, why do you need a wall if they're saying they need more people?
So what I would say is, first and foremost, I'm absolutely responsible, first and foremost, and I take on that responsibility. It's something that we always struggle. I think every federal agency is always struggling with pay reform, overtime, more personnel. I don't think you're going to meet a chief of police or sheriff or agency head in federal agency that will ever say that we're okay, we don't need more people. So we do need more people. We're constantly looking at innovative ways to increase pay, whether it's overtime or retention bonuses, to keep the talented workforce we have. It's a continuing struggle. It's something I'm dedicated to, absolutely. And as far as the number of people, what I would say is the wall, again, I say it's a wall system as part of a multi-layered strategy. So you need the infrastructure, the technology, the infrastructure of the wall, along with technology and personnel. What happens is if you apply all three of those in the right way and the strategic location, it'll actually reduce the number of personnel that you need in that area so we can focus them to the more strategic locations. So it's a balance of both of that. So with every mile of wall that goes up, it increases our capability to do their job.
Will you commit to greater pay or at least clearing up the disparity between Customs and ICE and Border Patrolmen? Because when I was down there, that was their number one issue. They like the job that they're doing, but they want you guys to at least give them equal pay, that they're not getting paid equally to ICE and Customs.
So first of all, I hear the same thing, but first and foremost, you know what I hear first and foremost? What makes me proud to be a part of this and be standing next to them is they are proud to represent this country. They are proud to be on the front lines safeguarding our nation's borders. That's what they're proud of. And as the agency head, I should try to do everything I can to make sure that they're being paid and taken care of adequately. So I commit to that. Yes, absolutely, I commit to that. So, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, about the CBP agents that are doing credible fear screenings. Could you give us sort of an update on how many are doing it, at what ports of entry, what is the goal of the number as you scale up, and when you would like to have it scaled up?
So there's a few things to unpack there. So what we have done, and again, this is to augment USCIS asylum officers, because I think everybody knows here is there's just not enough asylum officers. So what we've actually done is trained a handful. I don't have the exact numbers to date now. I can get those for you, but we're continuing that program, and we're going to continue to expand that program to support USCIS. And right now, it's being successful. We've been able to, as part of our expedited process that we're doing, the temporary hearing facilities that are down there, those agents are helping as well to facilitate that expedited process. The program is working well. I'm taking a hard look at expanding that program because, again, USCIS plays an integral role in this process through the asylum officers. So that's kind of a bottleneck. If we don't have that capacity there, it's going to limit our ability to effectively expedite the process. So yes, sir.
Is there a target number that you can reach to say that the surge, essentially, of people coming across the border is over? And also, how are you counting those people who are stopped and remain in Mexico?
So those are really, really good questions. I've thought about that a lot. A couple times I've said, hey, I'd like to have the apprehensions under 500 a day. That's just me kind of throwing something out there at a manageable level, looking at what the historic lows are. I mean, at the end of the day, standing here as the commissioner of CBP, I'd like the number to be 0, but that's not realistic. So I think, again, Jay Johnson, I'll bring that up again, he said 1,000 was a bad day. So, if we could start getting that down to the 500 range, don't hold me to that. That's just a little bit of, unscientific, guesstimation that I'm putting out there. But, that becomes manageable. I think what's also important, though, and the reason why I hesitate to say, hold fast on a specific number like 500 is the demographic these days are very different. So if it was 500 Mexican adult males, that's very different for us. But when you're talking about their families and unaccompanied kids, that brings on a whole new dynamic, and that's one of the challenges for us. So 500 Mexican adult males is different than, 350 families and kids and 150 Mexican adult males. That challenges us. And so with that, we're going to be taking a look at that. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
It's just essentially, are you going to count asylees who remain in Mexico as apprehended?
Yeah.
U.S. asylees, how are you counting?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so we had a little glitch early on how we were doing that. So when we first apprehend somebody, that will be counted as an initial apprehension. But once they're enrolled in MPP and they go back to Mexico and then they have to come back and forth for the court hearings, we're not recounting them. But their initial apprehension, we are counting that as an apprehension. So.
Can I ask a follow-up to the question that Brian just asked about the need for retention bonuses?
Sure.
Last week, the Pew Research Center put out a study that said that the agency you briefly ran this summer, ICE, is viewed less favorably in the country than the IRS, less favorably than any other agency that they asked about. Is the need for a retention bonus or overtime pay evidence of a recruitment problem at the Border Patrol? Are you having a difficult time finding talented people as a result of the administration's policies and the way that they're viewed by the general public?
Okay, so I'll try to address that because I look at it very differently. So I don't know who those people are that view ICE in a negative light. As a law enforcement officer, I don't. I consider the men and women of ICE heroes, unequivocally. They are enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. And I read an example of just last week, 97 arrests, 6 states in the Midwest with people serious crimes, assault, battery, sexual assault that went on. So the men and women of ICE, this is part of the false narrative out there. They're doing this every day. Make no mistake, in my heart, and I believe 100% as a career law enforcement, dedicated my life to this country, that's what the men and women of ICE are doing. So if someone doesn't understand that, then get with me, get up to speed on what ICE actually does, and they will not have that perspective. So to say, okay, so to answer the second part of the question, retention bonus, I think right now there is a narrative out there negative about law enforcement out there that I think is a false narrative. I think when you have our own elected leaders that are out there trashing the men and women of law enforcement, actively trashing, saying lies, saying something like a Border Patrol agent is forcing a migrant to drink from toilet water, which is a lie. That is what's the narrative out there. When you talk about the morale of the men and women Border Patrol, for example, we're asking them to do all kinds of stuff they were never trained to do. We're asking them to take care of kids, order baby diapers, and baby formula. Their morale isn't impacted by that. You know what their morale is impacted? When we have a congressional leader, an elected leader that's out there vilifying the men and women of law enforcement, saying lies, pushing that false narrative that we know is not true. Instead, what they have done nothing. Congress has not passed one meaningful legislation to address this crisis, but yet they'll attack the men and women that are right now enforcing the laws that they did enact. That's the challenge. That's what I think impacts hiring and retention. But to answer your question, and well, pay is another issue. That's a bigger governmental issue that we have to. I'm competing with other federal agencies, but I'm committed to continue to compete.
Well, is that the issue though? I mean, that's why you have trouble getting recruits, is because
No,
of pay?
I don't think it's that simple of an issue. I think it's a complicated issue. I think morale is part of that. I think the vitriol that's out there is part of that. I think parents are talking to young men and women very different than they did before about a career in law enforcement. I think it's a bigger issue, more complicated. I'm being told one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Commissioner, clarification and then a question. You say 71 new miles of border wall have been built. Do you mean border wall in areas where there was no previous wall or barrier? Okay, just to clarify.
Right.
And then why only 71 miles? Obviously, this is a big political issue for the president. He brings it up as he is campaigning for re-election. Political pressure from the administration to significantly increase that number ahead of next November.
So let me answer the latter first. I feel absolutely no pressure from this administration to build more miles of wall. What I do feel pressure from is the men and women of the Customs and Border Protection, because they need this wall. They need the wall to do their job effectively, to safeguard and protect this country and themselves. That's where the pressure comes from me, to make sure I'm giving them all the tools and resources they need to effectively do their job and do it safely. Now, for the 71 miles of new wall, make no mistake, if you take a 4-foot high, X-cross steel, vehicle barrier, and you replace it with a wall system that's 30 foot high, has an anti-climb plate to it, has lighting, technology, and access roads, makes no mistake, from an agent out in the field perspective, a leadership perspective, and my perspective, that's absolutely a new wall. Now, if you want to differentiate between a new wall where it replaced those dilapidated, unacceptable physical barriers and new linear miles, I think that's the correct way to talk about that. So right now, those 71 miles have not been new linear miles, but that's part of what's being processed right now. So in shortly, we're going to begin construction like an RGV. RGV, strategic location, right now, 40 to 60% of the apprehensions throughout this fiscal year, and we're getting ready to build a little over 100 miles of new linear border wall down there. And I'll tell you, this isn't easy. If you talk to General Semonite, who's leading the charge of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it's a tough process. You have to obtain the land. Land acquisition is a tough thing. Sometimes you'll go and maybe you only have a couple of miles of linear wall, and you've got 600 landowners that you have to deal with. You have some public land, some federal land. It's a difficult process to do. But I tell you what, 71 miles of new wall systems have been built is more than what was built in the previous administration. So it's being built in RGV in a strategic location. So, yes, sir. I guess this is the last one.
You're
Yep.
talking about the new linear wall and the 71 miles. How is Mexico going to pay for that?
Look, to me, I'm a law enforcement guy. I'm the commissioner of CBP. I'm not. That's a political thing to me. Well, let me answer your question. That's a political thing to me. To me, I don't care who's paying for the wall. All I care about is it's being built, and it is being built. And by the end of 2020, we're going to have 450 miles of beautiful new wall that's going to absolutely exponentially increase the Border Patrol to safeguard your towns and your cities and your state.
Ask
So-
Mexico